Okay, got a video tutorial here for Lou of the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project. Lou sent me this original TIFF file by email today. Let's get the right file for a start. And what Lou is trying to do is record both proms and disk detail in one image, one exposure, okay, which I think is possible. So let's just take a little look at this image first. First thing I do think, if I was taking this image, you can tell by the actual image here and also by the histogram, it's quite overexposed. This is, I think there's quite a bit of clipping going on here. There's quite a few areas you can see where the whites are completely burnt out. Okay, so I do think, Lou, if you are going to do this method, I would definitely aim to record so that your histogram, I would say, is you've got the peak here at the moment. You want the peak to be somewhere over there, so it just tails off nicely, and just the last little slither, this little line, this last little slither of histogram is finishing somewhere around about there. You can see from the levels. We've got a little level there. It's telling us somewhere around 250, 245 is finishing about there. Okay, so the main peak, the main hump of the histogram is going to be tucked away over here somewhere like that. Okay, no worries. Anyway, that's not what this tutorial is about. What I do want to show you is how we can use, or how you can use, the shadow and highlights function to try and regain some of this lost information here. Because, yep, okay, we can see from this image we've got some lovely proms caught there. We can see we've got the spicule ring caught as well. We have got disk detail, but it's quite washed out. Okay, that's again due to this this overexposure that's going on. So the function I'm going to use in Photoshop to try and deal with this is the shadow and highlights function, and that's located over here. So if we go into image and then we go into adjustments, and then we've got the shadow and highlights function down there. Okay, so I'm going to click on that and let's see where we get to. I've got always used this one here. There's two ways we can do this. We can have it like that, or we can have the show more options. I prefer to do the show more options, and I'm going to do a little talk around this, show you what's going on. Key to me here is the fact we've got the histogram visible. Okay, it's really important we've got the histogram visible. What the histogram shows us, let's click this off a second so we can see the histogram. What the histogram does show us, this is live, okay, where it's dark like this, so that this will change with the image as we change the image. I think it's really important to see the histogram, see what's going on with your image, what you're doing with your image, and you'll see later on when we do sharpening how we can use the histogram as an indicator as to whether we are or are not sharpening enough, or more to the point, to the correct radius. So let's go back to shadow and highlights. So again, make sure you've got more options shown there. Make sure preview's ticked, because there you go, you can see that shows you live what's going on the screen. It's good to see what's going on. Right, let's talk about a few of the functions on shadow and highlights. We want to be dealing with the highlights today. I think that's the issue in this image here, that quite simply there's too many of them. So let's try and position that so we've got a good selection of detail going on here. We can see prominences. We'll just bring them into, so we can see them a bit more. We can see some of the darker areas like the sunspot there. We've got some filaments going on. I mean, you know, there's a bit of disk detail as well to see as well. So let's take a look first of all at what is actually going on with shadow and highlights, what it does as a function, as a tool in Photoshop. Okay, so first things first, let's look at this thing here, tonal width. And if I hover over it, there you go, it's telling me, it says enter tonal width, 0 equals narrow, 100% equals broad. Okay, that's all good and well, but what does this mean? Well, let's have a look. Let's see what's going on here. If I drag that back down, watch two things. First of all, a histogram on the left, and secondly, the image on the right. And it will take a little while for things to catch up today because I've got the record software running in the background, and it always makes things a bit more sluggish. Okay, so there we go. So I'll put that on 100. Let's compare to, let's go all the way to 0. There. Okay, if we look at 0, the histogram, not really very much is happening there at all to the shape of that histogram. Shifted it over ever so slightly to the left, to the midtones, the shadows end of the histogram, but not much has happened at all. But so that's a very, like it said before, very narrow. There we go. It's not much going on there. Very narrow tonal width. But let's drag that out a bit more. Okay, let's see what's going on. I'll stick it to 100. Really has stretched it out. It's almost twice the width it was before. Okay, I'm going to stick it down probably just on 90, just for the sake of it. So that gives you an idea. Well, because what we want to do is, if we just stick that back to 0, all the information in Lou's image here is all squished down on the disk, which is this. That bit there is basically the disk on the image. That bit there's the problems. Okay, right at the very end we've got the sky. These bits here are these overexposed areas. So what we want to try and do is get a bit more detail visible on the disk. We want to draw out this level of detail on the disk. So we want to have the tonal width nice and high on this particular image. Some images won't need as much because it's already quite stretched out in the first place. But on this image we need to drag it out a bit, and you can already see there it's starting to make the filaments stand out a bit more. We've got a little dark on there, a few little filaments, the spots are starting to stand out a little bit more. Okay, so let's move on. The next one is amount. Let's see if I hover, if it's going to tell me anything about it. Let's click off that, so it still thinks it's on there. There we go. Is it going to tell me amount? No, it's not going to tell me what amount does. It's easy enough to see anyway. Okay, amount is by how much we are shifting the shadows. Okay, down. The highlights, shifting the highlights down to the left, down towards the shadows end of the histogram. Now, if we have it on 100, you can see what's happened here. It's changed our histogram. So all this. See this peak here, what the original image looks like there. Okay, it's stretched it all out, so we've got this shape there. Okay, which, as you can see, is brought about lots and lots of detail. I think that looks kind of quite unnatural. I can't quite put my finger on why it looks unnatural, but I do think it does. So I'm going to back off a bit there. And again, this is going to be down to taste. A lot of it's down to taste with these things. But maybe something about 60%. There we go. 60% maybe. Maybe do a little less. Maybe do a little more. Maybe 50%. It's all down to personal taste. I think going the other way, 70 gives the illusion that you're double stacking, but you're not really. It's just giving this unusual view of the sun. It's all to taste. So it's what you like. Everybody has their own preferences, and that's what counts. It's as much as an art with this as with anything. Okay, I'm going to stick it to 50 just for argument's sake. I think that looks okay. And you can see here. Go back to our histogram. How it's starting to. We've gone from this shape here. How we're starting to stretch it out. Make it instead of this single spike of a peak. It's more of a broad, almost bell-shaped, okay, which is what we're doing here. Okay, one last thing I want to look at on the highlights is this thing, the radius. Now this is a very interesting function. It says enter a radius value to set for the scale of corrections. Okay, again, I think sometimes it's easy just to see what's going on with these rather than to rely on those things to tell us. So probably run it slightly slower here because, as I say, the record software is running in the background. But let's play around with the slider. Let's see what it does. Okay, you'll notice there we go. It's making our image quite a bit brighter. So if I have it all the way at 2,500 pixels, it's making it all brighter. There we go. Our histogram's proving that it's shifting the bulk of this image over to the right, so it's brightened our image up. Okay, let's bring it down. We don't want it quite that big. Now watch carefully here. We've talked about on the threads on the Charlie Bates Solar Astronomy Project forum, myself and Lou and a few others, about this radius function here as to what it does. And we've noticed before it leaves this ring around the limb, this bright ring around the limb if it's set wrong. Okay, I'm going to try and demonstrate that to you now. So let's Hopefully, is it going to work? Oh, there we go, it's working. I do it nice and slowly. If you watch, I would say, watch this region pretty much on the limb here, probably about the width of the yellow circle that you see in there. Let's slide it around a bit and watch what happens. Whoops, I'm doing it way too much. Don't go all the way to 2,500. Let's try about 150. Start at 150. Can you see how? There you go. It's just there. We got a good one there. And there we go. And drop it down a bit more. Lift it up. Drop it down. Can you see how it's not really doing anything to the rest of the image? Just this bit around the limb here. Now we don't want that because the limb naturally darkens off on the sun. The sun is brightest at its centre and darker around the limbs. We're kind of introducing this unnatural curve here where it starts off brighter as we move away from the centre. It gets darker and then it gets brighter again around the limb, which is peculiar. And it's not actually. If that was doing something to our provenances, maybe it will have some value, but it's not really. It's just making this strange loop around the rim, feather, whatever you want to call it, around the limb. So I'm going to drop this all the way down. You might try 5, you might try 10. Some of mine I've been doing 10, seems to be my default setting. I think it leaves a little bit of a... Lift it back up again, let's try. You can see there, between certainly 40 and 20 is quite a noticeable one. Let's drop it all the way down to about 10. I'm going to stick it on 10 there, okay? Keep it like that. And the only other one I want to look at here, because we've got the problems, with it originally being an image that was quite overexposed in the first place, all our problems are visible there. It's a little blur at the top of the image, there's a little softer at the top. That could be poor seeing, who knows, doesn't really matter for what we're doing. You can see here, my shadows, I'm not doing anything with the shadows at the moment, we're on 0 throughout. I want to be subtle here because I can very quickly destroy this image if I'm not careful. So I'm just going to lift up the amount by a few percent, and there you go. I've got up 10%. If you watch the sky, the background of the sky there, okay, it's going to lift it up. You see how it goes from that black to a grey. Watch the histogram this time. Let's see if we see it moving on the histogram. There we go. Can you see how you get the little white and dark lines, the black lines with the stripes in between? That's indicating it's stretching it. Okay, it's stretching the data. You can see there it's that original peak's broadened out a bit. Again, it's going to depend exactly how much you think it spoils the background sky, because we can get these rings, this posterization going on here. Are we on there? 13, 14. You can use the cursor keys, the up and down cursor keys for this, not just the mouse. What are we going to try? 15. Let's try 20. Let's try 20. We're only playing around with this image. Okay, so click OK. So these are the values I've settled on here. Click OK. Let's have a little look at our image. Still slightly overexposed here. I think that might be a tuning thing. It does highlight different things going on in the image now. You can see down here we've got some kind of bright stripe on. That's could be I think, looking around at this image, I think Loop has not got crop selected, because I can see a few sections here where there's stacking artifacts. I don't think we got crop selected and auto stack it here. Okay, right. What we want to do now is we're going to do some sharpening, but I want to have a look at the histogram. Remember originally? Should have saved the base layer here so I could show you the difference. We had the single bright peak up here, and then these proms down. Another peak down there which corresponds to the proms. Well, we've stretched that right out. We've covered all this surface detail here. We've stretched our proms out a bit more as well. Got a little bit more from the proms. We could probably, I think, maybe, if we press Ctrl and L, that'll bring up your levels. We can maybe tuck in the black levels a bit. Maybe 1 or 2, put 1 at a push. I think that's probably as far as I go there. Probably just leave it, to be honest. I'm going to do 1. But let's have a look at sharpening. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because I want to. I see far too many images that I think are over sharpened using the far too large a radius for sharpening. So we'll have a look at that today. We'll have a look at that now. I'm going to show you also how to use the histogram as a way to gauge whether you are using the right amount of sharpening. I do all the sharpening in Photoshop, again in filters. Go down to sharpen, and I'm going to use this one here, Smart Sharpen. Okay, so let's click on that. Go through a few things. Okay, we've got a preview here. You can see on the main image how this is applying it. I always go for basic on this. Maybe I should play around with my sharpening a bit more, but I've got it on basic. Settings default. Okay, I always remove Gaussian blur on mine. I know some people remove lens blur, motion blur, different ways of doing it. And I also have more accurate ticked. If more accurate isn't ticked, it does some horrible things to it like that. Okay, I also have more accurate ticked. Now, okay, I'm going to start off with some values here, and we'll see how we get on. So I want to move that up there because I want to see three things going on here. I want to see the image in its, well, we haven't got its entirety, but a larger scale image there. I want to see the 100% version, and I also want to see the histogram. Okay, and this is really important. I want to show you how we can use the histogram as a aid for sharpening. Now, there's actually lots of lovely detail visible in this image. I'm not entirely sure what scope it was produced with. I'm hoping Lou will tell me at the end of it. I think it might have been his 80mm, maybe. I'm sure Lou will tell us. Okay. I want to see this at a variety of scales, so let's just bring that so we can see as much as possible going on there. Now I've got this set to 500 and a radius of 1. Okay, now let's mess around with this. So I'm going to go the other end of the scale here. Whoops, a radius of 0.1, and you'll see what I can do as well. I can click on this window here, and that shows me a before and after, and nothing much is really happening there. And look at the histogram as well. Nothing's happening. Nothing's happened. Look at the screen there. Nothing's happening. Incidentally, if you click around different bits on the screen, it will pull up in the window there. I'm going to do around here because I've got a spot. I've got a filament. We've got this plays around here as well. Lots of things to see. Now, if we use the arrow key with this selected, the up arrow, we can increase a point at a time. So what? A 0.0 at a time, 0.01 at a time. So I'm going to go up 0.2, 0.3, 0.4. I'm going to stop on 0.5 just for a second, just to have a look. Okay, you should start seeing I'm clicking there. It's very subtle. Okay, but it is starting to apply some sharpening. It's on half a pixel radius there, which isn't very much. Let's go up one bit more, 0.7, 0.8, 0.8. Okay, it's much more noticeable now. And you should start seeing, just on the histogram, can you see we've got this little faint, little white specks coming around the edge of the histogram here, the sides of the histogram. And there you can see just on the top of that little peak is starting to disappear a bit. Okay, keep your eye on that because this is a key thing with sharpening. Okay, there you go. You can see how it applies. I'm going to go one more, 0.9. Ooh, all of a sudden it's quite a difference. Okay, in terms of it, all of a sudden we've got this detail starting to snap out. Keep your eye also on the scale there because Lou's original image, I'm not sure how big it is. Let's have a little look. 1400 pixels by 1900 pixels. Just click down there on the dot bit and it'll tell you. So that's quite a large image. We're viewing that, I think, in 50%. It's got to be about 50%, that is, image scale. Okay, which is interesting, something to bear in mind because that's probably the sort of scale it's going to be presented at if you are hosting it on a website, putting it on the Charlie Bates forum, putting it on Facebook, wherever else you post and host your images. So useful to keep our eye on these three things. So 0.9, I'm going to stick it up to 1. We've got a whole 1 there. Okay, that's looking quite pleasant in terms of the sharpening, I think. That's quite a nice image there. But look at our histogram. What's happening here? You can just see the top of it. I like to think of this as a pile of sand or something like that that's gradually eroding away. It all starts eroding from the top, this top peak, and what it does is it rolls down either side like that and starts filling up down at the bottom, which is what you'd have if you got a pile of sand that's gradually collapsing. Okay, I'm going to demonstrate this in a moment. You're just losing this very sharp peak. Okay, now watch the histogram here. I'm going to go up in 0.1s again. Look, all of a sudden it's really dropped off there. Go back one. Whoops. You see how the histogram's jumping around like that? Doesn't seem like much, but that's quite important. Okay, let's try it again. Go up to 1.2. Oh, our pile of sand, our histogram is just toppling over now. Okay, it's all running from the top, this central peak, all the way down the edges, either side. A couple of things are happening here. It is, if we watch, it's making our shadows darker. The sunspots are getting darker. It's also making our light areas here, the plage, it is whitening those out. Those are becoming more and more saturated, more and more overexposed. Keep an eye on this image here as well. Right, let's crank this up a bit more. I'm going to go to 1.5. All of a sudden now you can see it's starting to look quite unnatural. I think this image, we've actually lost detail. We've over sharpened it. The radius is way too high. Look at our histogram, our pile of sand. It's all toppled down the sides. You can see the original line of it there. Okay. All this stuff from the top is toppled down the sides, either side like that. Okay, this is sharpening way too much. Starting to look unnatural. If you hold down Shift and do the up or down arrow, there you go. You'll see it does it in whole unit increments. Let's go up to 2.5. This is going to be horrible now. There you go. Really broken down. Okay. Really has broken down. We're sharpening on way too large a radius there. That's unnatural. Our star doesn't look like that. Look at that. It's not very nice at all. So, but look at our histogram. What's it done? This pile of sand, the histogram toppled all the way off. Okay, down either side of it. You can see the original shape there. Doesn't look anything like it at all. It's not doing much with the shadows. Okay, in terms of the shape. But look at our problems. They're not very nice at all. Okay, it's not very nice at all at this radius, 2.5. So we've got to back off. It's the only thing we can do. So holding Shift down arrow drops it down by 1. 1.5 I think is way too strong on this. I am going to go all the way on 1. Some people will be sat there thinking that's not enough, but we're going to do a little trick. Okay, we've not done much to the histogram. That's the key thing. I think it's sharpening it without destroying the original image. Okay, without contorting the original image. That's looking quite good. I'm going to click OK on that. One more little trick now is I always use another layer of sharpening, and that is the unsharp mask function. Okay, again in filter, sharpen, unsharp mask, and let's have a look. Again, this is a subtle one here. Okay, let me turn this all the way up. I'm going to put 100 in here. This is going to look horrible. Okay, you can see it really has sharpened up. It's made it more contrasty, really contrasty, but I think it looks unnatural. Look at a histogram. There we go. Can you see our pile of sand, all the stuff from the top, tickling down the sides again? We don't want it to be doing that. That's our histogram telling us that we're destroying the image. So let's back this off a bit. So we'll just select that, holding Shift down arrow. It's going to take it down in 10s. Watch the histogram as well. Okay, that's going to start climbing back to where it was. 70, 60, 50, 40. I think 30 is probably about right. Let's just have a little look. Let's take preview off. It just gives it that little teeny subtle bit of contrast, I think. Adds that little teeny subtle bit of contrast like that. There we go. Click OK. And if we have a look now, I think that's quite a difference to our original image. I'll tell you what I am going to do. I'm going to resave this, and I'll call it something. I'll call it original one just for the sake of it. save that as a 16-bit file, and I will open recent original TIFF. Let's just get them at the same scale, 50%, 50%. And what we can do here, do a little bit of a comparison with our windows. If we go in there and put our two windows side by side, whoops, let's control minus, that brings it in, and there you go. You can see that's the difference we've got there between the two images, the original one, the raw unprocessed image, and our final one there. A couple of things I do think about the image. I think we're slightly off band here in this top half. I do think it's overexposed, but all these things are curable. Okay. As always with these things, I'm not saying it's the right way of doing it. I'm not saying it's the only way of doing it. I'm just saying it's the way that I've done it. Hope it's useful. Hope it's useful to you, Lou. Hope it gives people a bit of an insight as to the shadow and highlights function, and also a little bit of an insight as to the use of the histogram, and also a bit of sharpening there. And if you actually look in our history, what we've done here, we've not done very much at all. We've opened a file, we've applied shadows and highlights. Okay, I did a tweak of the levels. We got away without doing that, to be honest. I did a smart sharpen, and I did an unsharp mask. Okay, so not very much at all. Most of the time is taken up by me talking. Okay, hope it was useful. Hope it hopefully improves people's images, and hope it is useful too. Thanks very much for listening. Bye bye now.